Welcome to Insights for Manufacturing, the podcast that supports the UK manufacturing sector. So today I'm with Dr. Ollie Folayan and Louise Folayan, who are actually siblings, a couple of really good people that I've come into contact with recently by way of introduction from Louise Power, who you may or may not have heard of. Louise does a hell of a lot of work within the sort of diversity, inclusion and equality space. She's got her own podcast and a number of businesses. Louise kindly introduced me to Ollie a few months ago, and I was keen to find out about all the fantastic work that both him and Louise are doing with the Association for Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers, which was an organisation I was unfamiliar with until quite recently. What I'd like to do is to ask Ollie and Louise to just give us a quick overview as to how the Association for Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers came about and what your sort of main challenges and what's on the agenda for this year, really. So, Louise, I'd normally go ladies first if you want to introduce.
Hi, so I'm Louise. I'm an engineer, and I'm an engineer by day and an engineer by night as well. But I also chair AFBE, which is the Association for Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers. Our ambition is to have representation within the engineering space at the same level as the population. So at the moment, 9% of UK's population are from ethnic minority backgrounds, or global majority, as some would call it, but we're only 9% in the industry. I mean, we're 14% in the population, but we're only 9% in the industry. Now, that may not seem so bad until you look at the number of engineering students that are considering careers in engineering, that study at university, and that's at 30%. So what our objectives are is to engage people, one, from all backgrounds from a young age to consider engineering, but also focus on the people from ethnic minority backgrounds that enter the industry and help them to achieve as best as they can and as best as anybody else, without the barriers around discrimination, without the barriers around social mobility that a lot of people from these backgrounds have.
DE and I is such a huge topic at the moment, and as you've said, that stat is quite alarming. You know, I remember having a chat with Ollie, a couple of months or so ago, and I was just astonished to learn that a huge proportion of the BME grads coming out of uni are struggling to get into industry. Now, given we've got a huge skills gap in the UK, it just beggars belief how those two things aren't just being joined up, and we're not making use of talent that we've got in this country already. It's just ludicrous. So we'll get into that in a little bit more detail as we go along, I'm sure. Over to you then, Ollie. How did the association come about in the first place? Was it your idea? Was it Louise's? And how do your sort of roles differ then? Because I know you're at opposite ends of the country as well, aren't you?
Yeah, that's what we have to stay to get along. We have to be as far away from each other as possible. It came about because we both had interesting journeys into the industry. So I had started my career and been working for some years, and experienced some positive experiences, but also some challenging ones. And some of those challenging experiences are not something that happened at a particular time. They're a regular, everyday experience. But I suppose coming into an industry, it was my first experience of that kind of brand of culture, of work culture. And so at that time, it had a major impact. And it wasn't just the general sort of microaggressions that people often speak about. It was actually, in my case, it was directly working with somebody who was very hostile. And it was that the impact that they went on to have in terms of health in general, and the impact that was having just in my bias, motivation, background to me. We're all having these experiences that is not racism, but it's very common, and we all recognize it. And so that's to tell us that there is something that we needed to look on there. It was even more instructive that when I then thought within my organization, can I find people with a little bit more experience? those people were nowhere to be found. They weren't there. And we both had that experience where we were both engaged. So I would say that in terms of the idea has kind of occurred to us perhaps at different times, but it was one of those things that was meant to be, I think, in the sense that when we had the discussion, it was something that resonated with both of us. And we went out and spoke to a number of our colleagues, and 5 members started the very first AFBE. We now have around 2,500 members, so we've been on quite a journey. And that journey has been a very interesting one, but it's always felt as though we were growing into the vision, because at that very early stage, we spoke about quite a number of things that we have seen unfold in the last 15 years. Yeah.
Wow, what a journey. And I guess, there's a, with this big movement to, eradicate racism and get, more inclusion and diversity in the workplace. I mean, we need it in society. We absolutely need it in the workplace too. I suppose, this is almost like a snowball that's just rolling and getting bigger and bigger, which is great from a membership point of view, but it's also the awareness, I think. And, I was at an event in Birmingham a few weeks ago, the Allied Women in Engineering events that was put on by Beth and Jepson. And so that was focusing, specifically around, females in industry. And one of the things that sort of struck me was, I was probably one of 3, maybe 4 men at the event. And I think part of the problem, this could be attributed as well to the, the sort of Black and ethnic minority demographic as well, and the things you're doing at the association. I think more people like me, white men, need to support these things, because otherwise I don't think other people like me are going to probably bat an eyelid to it. It's, it's okay women turning up and supporting a women in engineering event, but that's not really the full solution to the problem, is it? And it's the same with this. I'm a white man. We're talking about, Black and minority ethnic engineers. Engineering and manufacturing is the space that I operate in. My brother's half Jamaican, so I come from a mixed race family. So this is not new or alien to me. He's my brother, and that's the end of it. And it's never even been a conversation. It's just the norm. But I think until, with all of these things, and I suppose you could also bring in things like disabilities and gender and all these sort of minority groups, for whatever the reason, whatever people's backgrounds, unless you are encouraging more of the majority, and obviously engineering and manufacturing is typically male oriented. But yeah, we need a little bit more diversity in the people that are coming along to these sort of things. So, I'm certainly doing my bit to try and encourage more white men to support and at least be aware of these sort of things. Until that happens, you're not going to be in a silo, because it's out there in the media and it's growing. But I do think there's an awful lot that can be done. With other people just getting involved, and this isn't an area of my speciality, but it's something that it's important, so let's have the discussion. So clearly, there are barriers to getting a much higher number of BME engineering graduates into engineering jobs. Nikkei kindly spoke about the percentages earlier. So what actually are the roadblocks, and what needs to be done to get more traction?
I think there are a number of challenges. The first challenge is around the networks. So if you are not part of a network from early on in your career, you don't have the opportunities that other people have. So I work in a big organization, and many of the placement students come from backgrounds where their family is already involved in the industry. They get a year's placement. Some of them also, even when they get a year's placement, they don't care whether it's paid or unpaid, because they can afford for it not to be paid. There are also issues around the fact that a lot of people from ethnic minority backgrounds end up in the non-Russell Group universities. Our profession is quite snobbish, so they will focus on the Russell Group universities. And even when statistics, the Royal Academy did a survey that showed that regardless of these, whether they go to Russell Group universities, whether they have a first class degree, the challenge of getting a job is still there. So we do have to recognize that there is an issue around bias and discrimination there as well. One of the things that we try to do at AFBE is that we try to prepare people to face these barriers. And I don't know if Ollie, you wanted to chime in on transition and the stuff that we do in that space.
That's right. Yeah. So one of the things that we found is quite early, as Nick has said, regardless of where people go, there are barriers that people face. And I think you and I had the conversation some weeks ago, Jeff, where we were talking about some of those issues. So what we decided to do, and that there is a crucial stage between the time a person completes the degree and the time they try to get a job. And there are sufficient experiments have been done out there that shows that it does matter what your name sounds like when you apply for a job. There were even comparisons done. Professor Bina Kandola has talked about some experiments have been done where it was a case of a person with an ethnic sounding name plus 8 years industry experience versus somebody with a white sounding name with no experience. And they pretty much had similar callback rates and responses when it came to applying for a job. So what we try to do, as Nick has said, is accept that those barriers are there and see how do we work through it. And one of the ways of doing that is trying to simulate the recruitment process, getting them in the room before they actually get in the room. So 10 years ago, we created a program called Transition, which all it just does, tries to simulate as real as possible what the recruitment experience will be like. It involves things like listening to experienced engineers and successful people talk about their progress and how they've made it into the engineering profession, how they've made it to the position that they're in. We have mock interviews. We have mock case studies. We assess them throughout. It feels as though they are actually in an interview. And what's happened over time is that we've seen that it's a simple format, but it actually works. We have seen people who had never been in an assessment center before perform so well when they're faced with the real thing that other people ask, have you been in one of these before? Says, no, I haven't. Of course, they've been in this pretend scenario multiple times. And that gave them that bit of extra confidence to apply for a job. That what often follows that is a mentor-mentee process. So I met people. I remember somebody who I met about 7 years ago, and he was someone with a couple of master's degrees, clearly a very clever guy who had been looking for work. And I had been trying to get him to come to Transition, and he says, "Are they going to give me a job?" That was his general attitude at the time. But I said, "Just come along anyway. You never know." He came along to event in 2018, right? So I told you I met him in 2015. He came to one in 2018. Came along to one of the events. He got in touch with somebody who became like a mentor to him. So that was February 2018. By May 2018, he was in work, and he was given a reference by the person he met at this event, who felt they knew on the basis of what he had done, they felt confident enough to give him a reference. And yeah, within a short time, he was able to get a job. And there are so many stories like that we could share. And in a way, our main message to people has often been twofold. Yes, we do not infantilize people by pretending the barriers are not there. We talk about the barriers, and we ensure that what we talk about is based on actual research work, peer-reviewed work, and verifiable facts, not opinion. But at the same time, we are able to demonstrate through the success stories that we've had, and through ourselves as role models, that these problems are not insurmountable.
That's a good point you make there as well about the the verification and the fact that you're using actual real data as opposed to just opinion or hearsay. Because everybody's got an opinion on these things, but it's important that everybody involved, down to people like me, tagging along to these sort of conversations, are aware of the facts and make decisions based on facts and try and adopt our behaviors through reading facts. You know, it's just
That's
so
right.
important. So as I understand it, then you influence governmental policies in relation to BME engineers and ethnic minority community groups in the UK. So how's that facilitated? You know, what wins are you able to share with me today?
We have a long history with being attractive even before, as I always say, even before diversity became sexy. We have a long history with liaising with people within governmental organisations. So, for example, we have Chiomwara, who's the only chartered engineer in Parliament, as one of our members of the advisory board, and so we've had a long history with providing our insight. There are also the all-party parliamentary groups, which we've been involved in. But more importantly, more recently, we've had government departments coming to us to ask for advice on various issues and various matters. And it's not just the UK government, the Scottish government as well. On many occasions, have asked us for advice on different things, not just on diversity, but on things on the energy transition, on things on skill shortage, and so on and so forth. And so our aim is really to give them an insight into what that entails, not just from a diversity lens, but from a technical lens, because we have a lot of people with years and years of technical expertise within these sectors, and that's part of what we want to demonstrate. So one of our missions, for example, is to display the talent, and this is our avenue of displaying our talent. So for example, I know that Ollie did something for COP26, and we have people, some people will only listen to you when you have that technical expertise, and that's what we try to, our board members, including ourselves, that's what we try to demonstrate, that you can be an excellent engineer and you can still think diversity and inclusion is super important. So we've been able to kind of make that link between government and what we're doing in a way that ensures that that's a consideration. So for example, when the strategy came out, the UK innovation strategy came out a few years ago, one of the things that we identified was the fact that there was no link between there's a lot of talk around innovation, but no link about on diversity, and we raised that as an important point to consider. So things like that. We've also been to number 10 Downing Street to talk about these issues and to raise awareness on how the community can be, you can engage the community in a way that is effective rather than just box ticking. So lots of things that we're doing and we continue to do in that sort of space.
Brilliant. And that really resonates with me, because one of the first things that springs to mind with me when people talk about diversity is diversity of thought. There's so many complex problems in the workplace, in the world, in society. Go back to just simple problem solving, whether you were at school in a group. If you've got, it's like any sort of form of brainstorming, or, you're looking at solving a problem. If you've got 4 or 5 heads thinking of that problem instead of one person, the chances are you are going to solve the problem, but you might come up with different ways of solving the problem. And in business and society, there's lots of ways of doing things, but some of them have cost implications. Others have social implications. And so unless we have that diversity of thought, we're not going to really solve the problems in the best way. And you can't get that diversity of thought in the first place unless you've got diversity in the people that are around the table. So I totally get that. And I just think, for me personally, anybody that's not really up to speed with diversity, inclusion, and equality, if it's not their thing, and let's be brutally honest, there are people in society where it's just not on their agenda. We can't get away from that. It's wrong, but it happens, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So I think my thought process to that is to get more people that maybe aren't engaging in this important topic to think from the very first stage of think about diversity of thought. It shouldn't be about race or the color of your skin or where you're from or what you believe in. It's about how can you contribute to the here and now, to your society, to your workplace, to your family, whatever it might be. But I think, you know, you mentioned a great point about, you know, these things aren't a tick box exercise. And it really frustrates me. There are so many things that I see going on in businesses, in the media, I dare say some of it in government. There's far too many things that people are talking about, lots of hot topics. We haven't got time to talk about them all today, or even in this podcast series. There's that many of them. So much box ticking going on. I just wish it would stop. And oh, crikey, yeah, I'm gonna have to stop now because I'll really get on my soapbox. But yeah, the whole box ticking thing, it's just it doesn't serve a purpose, does it?
That's right. I was going to actually add something to what you were just saying there.
Please.
I think the way I think about diversity and inclusion is, imagine loads of people walk into a room and they all walk into the room slightly blindfolded. So blindfolded, they all walk into a room. You then ask them to perform a task and they need to identify the right people to perform that task. Now, until everyone kind of takes off their blindfolds, you don't get to see the people. And in many ways, as a result of history, as a result of our upbringing, none of us were brought up in the Federal Republic of woke utopia, where everyone has got everything right. As a result of all of those things, we all have these things called perceptive filters, which is basically the blindfold that affects the way that I see you. We look at people and we assume based on a set of metrics or stereotypes that they are a certain way, or we assess whether we like it or not, their ability to do things. Now, how do we get ourselves to be a more effective working, functional organization where you are truly utilizing the potential of every individual? Well, it's to take off these blindfolds, take off these perceptive filters, so that you see the real person. It's not a substitute for competence. It's actually the correct route to competence. It's like when people talk about positive discrimination and they say, well, positive discrimination is illegal in the UK anyway, but when they talk about the impression is often that if you're advocating diversity, we're surrendering of excellence. But the opposite is true. It's the idea that positive discrimination is what happens at the moment. When I act on the basis of a prejudice, or when I hire after my own kind, and I'm not open to the various ways in which competence is fleshed out, that is positive discrimination, whether we like it or not. And so the process of diversity for me is, how do we take off these filters so that we see talent? Because that's why there is a correlation between more diversity and better performance.
Excellently articulated. You know, I'm gonna have fun going back through the transcript from this this podcast, because there's so much to learn, which is the main reason for doing this in the first place. So, what are the main benefits for BME engineers to join the association?
There's so many benefits. One, it's a sense of belonging, feeling that there are other people like you that have probably had similar experiences as you in the same space, willing to support you. It's also an opportunity to support other people, and then raise your own personal profile. Some of my support systems and support networks have come about as a direct result, obviously apart from Ollie, who I've known since birth, have come about through being part of AFBE. It's also a place where you can challenge yourself, because sometimes we're so comfortable in where we are that we don't make as much progress as we should. So with the organization, even just looking at the exec board, I mean, just reading through the different bios on the website will inspire you to think that you can achieve a lot more, because there are people that are trailblazers within the organization just doing fantastic work. It's also an opportunity to contribute to fairness in our society. So being part of AFBE, and as Ollie normally says, it doesn't matter if you're black or white, we have a wide range of members of different backgrounds.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter where you're from, you can be part of AFBE, you can be part of a fairer society, you can be part of making a difference in an industry that so desperately needs to come to the 21st century.
Absolutely, and that's a really good point as well. You know, other individuals are welcome. You know, because I think from maybe from an outsider looking in, or people that aren't even aware of the association, they may assume that it's just for Black and minority ethnic engineers, and it's not necessarily. You know, and again, going
That's
back to
right.
what I said earlier, you know, the more people that can get behind what you're doing, the better. So you mentioned transitions. Can you just give a brief overview of some of the other sort of programs and activities that you run?
Okay. We have, with the word we often use as cradle to grave approach to our engineering. So everything from programs that reach people as young as 9 to people trying to get into the latter end of their careers, senior positions. And so when for 8 to 18-year-olds, we have one of the first programs we ever created at AFBE was the Making Engineering Hot program, which I'm sure you'd have heard me say loads of times. We initially thought about calling it Making Engineering Sexy. Well, we thought maybe not, but yeah, making engineering hot. So yeah. But in Scotland, we've got a similar sort of identical program we call Next Gen. So that's for 8 to 18-year-olds. We hold school visits. We provide opportunities for internships. We have also every other Saturday we hold an online event. And that covers everything from, you know, somebody was just talking about 3D printing last time we had a session, and they talked about how they fixed their Hoover using an item that they had printed with their 3D printer. You know, I did something on the energy transition just before that, and somebody else, Roma Agrawal, did a talk on structures. So we have those kinds of events for 8 to 18-year-olds. We also hold a coding club that happens every other week. So that's for young people. When they eventually get to university, we've got transition, as we said before. We've also got a program called Real Projects, and that takes it one step further. Transition looks at the recruitment process. Real Projects looks at some examples of actual projects that have taken place in industry. It helps people understand what made this project successful from a technical point of view, but also an interpersonal point of view. And then we got a mentoring program. And then for those who are trying to get into get into senior roles, our research shows that Black representation, for example, on the boards of the top 100 engineering companies is lower than 0.3%, so a very small percentage. So in order to address that, we have a program called Transcend, and that is recently being rolled out, and that will look at different aspects to do with leadership and try to awaken the sleeping leader in many of these people, because very often they'd have had a very successful technical career. This is saying that if you have the desire and the ability to go to a more sort of corporate managerial role, there should be no reason why you can't do it. And so that's what we try to address. So yeah, these are the programs that we run.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for explaining that. So we're almost sort of coming up to the end of the podcast today. So I'd like to ask both of you really for any businesses looking to get involved and support the Association of Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers. I know you've got some sponsors. How could other businesses perhaps, you know, find out how they can address their own imbalance in their own businesses? What's the best way for people to contact you and to get involved or find out more information?
www.afb.org.uk. Contact us through that, and we're on all the socials, so you can contact us through that as well. And to be honest, for us, it's about having that initial conversation and finding out what people are looking for, and how they want to engage. Because for us, it's about impact. So it's not just about saying you're a member of AFBE. It's about understanding what you want to achieve through AFBE.
Absolutely, that's brilliant. Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you both today. Ollie and Nikkei, thank you very much for joining me today on Insights for Manufacturing. So that's the end of another episode of Insights for Manufacturing. Hope you've enjoyed the show today. Thank you very much indeed to Dr. Ollie Folayan and Dr. Louise Power for such an impactful and interesting discussion around the Association for Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers. Look out for the next episode of Insight for Manufacturing and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.